Today I'd like to show you how to paint a very simple snowman in watercolor. We'll start with a very inexpensive watercolor set. Now you may have one that has less colors, and that's fine, you'll be able to do this too. We'll use the brush that came with the set, and as you can see here, I have a few other ones. If you happen to have some, keep those handy too. And just for fun, I'm going to have a little bowl of salt on the side. I'll show you what we'll do with that in a moment. We'll also use a little masking tape and watercolor paper. Now using the masking tape, what I like to do is sometimes tape the edges. The reason why I do this is just in case I want to have a nice clean white border around my painting. And if you do this, make sure to press firmly on the tape so it doesn't allow any of the water and color to seep underneath the edge. Then using a pencil, let's lightly sketch where we want our snow to be. I know you can hardly see the line, but if I press really hard, then it'll show through the watercolor. So just press hard enough that you can tell where the objects are supposed to go. Then it's time to decide where we want to put the snowman. Do we want him right in the center and have that the first thing you see, or make it a little more interesting and just slightly off to the side? Now we know a snowman is really 3 big balls of snow stacked on top of each other. They're basically circles, so let's go ahead and stack 3 circles on top of each other. If you notice, I'm constantly moving my hand. I'm rotating it in a circle. This does a couple things. It helps me with my shape and to keep my pencil line light. And for his hat, let's start with a little oval and place it on top of his head. And to make it fun and interesting, let's give it a slight tilt. And for the rest of the hat, let's place a little square or a rectangle on top. Then to add a little color in the painting, let's give him a scarf. Now I know we all basically know how to draw a snowman. The only difference is, in watercolor, we're not using any paint. It's the white paper surface that's going to make the snowman. And finally, let's decide where we're going to place his arms. Then once we have our sketch, we can start painting. Then using the brush that came in the set, or even a slightly larger one, dip it in clean water to expand the hair, and then put the clean water around the snowman in the background. I know it can be a little hard to tell where the water is and where the snowman begins, so look for the shine on the paper and keep the area of the snow and the snowman dry. Now you can take the brush with the water right up to the pencil line, but you could easily go over the edge. So maybe just leave a little dry space just for now. So using our wet brush, let's go back to the palette and choose some of those blue colors for the sky and put them in our little mixing area so they blend well. If you like, you can even mix a few blues. You'll want to make sure that you're using enough water so when you take the color and apply it to the wet surface that it's going to be able to move. You don't want to gouge your paint or have it thick and pasty. Then when you're ready, fill your brush full of color and then take it to the paper surface. When applying your color, don't press too hard on your brush. Let the color run off the tip. And if you accidentally drip some color here and there, don't panic. Just take a little paper towel or terry cloth towel and lift up the color. Because we'll figure out how to use it in the painting in just a little while. Continue to take some of that blue color and go around the snowman and tilt and rotate your paper, move it around so the color can flow. Then while the surface is still really wet, let's go ahead, take that brush that has the color and bring it right up to the edge of the pencil line of the snowman. This is when you can actually change the shape. Just take your brush and take it right up to the pencil line. Now this is actually something called negative painting, where we're not really painting our object, we're painting around it. If you can, try to notice how much water I have on the surface and how the color moves. By using this amount of water, it really helps to do a few things. It can give you cleaner, clearer color and avoid those really heavy brush lines. Then using the amount of water on the surface, bring it right up to the edge where you want your snow. Then allow the excess water to run off the paper. Then using either a terry cloth or a paper towel, clean off the excess water along the edges. Then using the same color as we did for the sky, let's apply a few brush strokes to dry paper to give the snow some texture. And if you're wondering why we're using blue over some other color, because blue is a cool color. It seems cold, like an ice cube, like cold water and snow. Now you don't want to do too much, just a little bit, because we don't want to lose that white of the paper. Now if you look at the surface, it's not really wet and shiny, but it's still damp. At this point, we can have some fun and take some of that salt that we have and sprinkle it on in the sky. What we want to do is just put it on, let the paper completely dry, and see if we have some effects. What's going to happen is that the salt will absorb the surrounding color, which can possibly give us some snowflakes. Now, depending on the type of paper and paint that you're using, it can affect the outcome. We can start to see some of the results here, but since the paint that I'm using doesn't really have a lot of pigment to it, I'm not getting the results that I want. So what I'm going to do is darken the color. When using a set like this, we're pretty limited to the colors that we have. So we'll use the same blues that we did, along with maybe just a tiny bit of the purple and a dab of black. And when adding black, you want to be really careful because it can be really overpowering and turn your beautiful blue into black, which we don't want. So just use a tiny bit. Now I really did like that icy blue color in the background, but I wanted it to be darker. So I'll just add some of the color along the top, and to help it move, I'll add just a little more water. Then I'll move it around like I did before and allow the excess water and color to run off the paper. Then for fun, and to see if it makes any difference, I'll sprinkle a little more salt. Then let it dry. Then once dry, go ahead and rub off the excess salt and shake it off. Wipe away all the extra salt and let's see what you're left with. Now it would have been nice if the salt left some type of design on the surface, something similar to this. But since we added more color and are using these particular paints, we didn't get those results. So to help us get that snow that we're looking for, let's use a toothbrush and get it wet. Then bring it back to the palette, remove the extra water, and then dip it in the white color. Now since we're using watercolor, it's really transparent, which means that you can see through it, so we may not get what we want. But we'll go ahead and just give it a try. Now what I like to do is to take the tip, bristles down, and then just rub my thumb across the tip. That way all these little droplets of color end up on the paper. Then we'll take it to the painting and do the same thing. Now we can sort of see the snow, but it's not really bright. Another thing we could do is to take a brush and fill that full of color and gently tap it. Now this is okay and the snow looks a little bigger, but the color still isn't that bright white that I want. So at this point, let's go ahead and let the surface dry just a little bit, and then we're going to reapply more color. The reason why we want to let this dry is because if we do it now, it's all going to turn into one big blob. But in the meantime, we can start painting the snowman. And we'll begin with his hat. Now you can choose any color you want, but I'm going to use black. The reason why I'm doing this is because it's going to stand out and look clean. I'll leave 2 white areas, one for the hat band and one to give the impression of maybe a buckle or a shine on the hat. Then we need to give him eyes and a smile. And of course, don't forget the buttons. Now we could stop here. This looks really good, and we know it's a snowman, but it might look even better if we add a little color. So let's give him a scarf. Now I'm going to add stripes, but it could also be a solid line. Now to help him look really round and give him a shadow, let's take some of that sky color and add it to one side. Then using a clean brush, I'm going to soften a few of those edges. What that means is that I'm going to remove that really hard line that shows it's a brush stroke. Then of course he needs a nose, and what would be better than adding a carrot? So let's take some orange color and then place it on our brush and press just a little harder and then make a little point. Now this is looking good and we could stop now, but I think he needs some arms. So let's choose a brown color with just a tiny bit of black, and let's make some branches. Now if you notice my brush, it has a point to it. That's going to make it easier. Now I need my paper to be completely dry, and if you notice my brush, I've got a point to it. What I want to do is be careful that I don't press too hard, because I just want to get a thin little line. Then we'll go ahead and just give him a few little fingers. And for the hat band, let's just fill it in with a little bit of color. Then let's just add a little more shadow on top of that dried color, so he really has a nice big belly. Then using that same color, we'll just place it right underneath the bottom of him so it looks like he's really sitting on top of the snow. And if you want, you can soften some of those lines. Now we're almost done, but for that final touch, I think he needs a little more snow. So to make it really stand out, I'm going to use a little white acrylic paint and just spatter it on. And it's okay if some of the color goes right over him, because he's standing in the snow. Now we have a wonderful painting of a snowman, and you can send it as a card or even frame it and keep it for the holidays. Now I hope that you have a lot of fun doing this. So until next time, happy painting!